All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Soflene Mao, and today I have the distinct honor of bringing to you a very, very special friend, and no other than Dr. Emad Rahim. He is an award-winning author, Fulbright Scholar, TEDx Speaker, and global thought leader whose life began in the Killing Fields of Cambodia. Arriving in America as a refugee and growing up on the streets of Brooklyn, he survived violence, poverty, and abuse, only to rise as a celebrated educator, entrepreneur, and advocate for diversity and resilience. Yes, yes. Honored at the United Nations, invited to the White House, and featured in major media, Dr. Rahim's story is a masterclass in turning adversity into purpose. We're honored to welcome him to share his powerful journey and the leadership lessons that shaped his life. Let's give it up for Dr. Emad Rahim.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm so happy, Bong. First of all, Chimdip Bong. It's such a pleasure, such an honor. We have been chasing each other's calendars, haven't we?
Yeah, back to back. Back to back.
Back to back. So finally got a hold of you, and your time is so valuable. So I wanted to just kind of turn it over to you. And how are you feeling these days, Bong?
I'm good. You know, this year I hit 47.
What?
Right? Yeah, so that's that age where you usually go through some serious reflection.
Right.
And so I've been doing a lot of that. So I haven't hit a midlife crisis yet. So I haven't bought the Porsche, right? Or maxed out my credit cards yet, but who knows, right?
Yes. Well, you know what? I just have to say the last time I saw you, we were in Southern California. It's probably like 10 years ago. We were doing a leadership conference hosted by Bong Nancy Lee. And it was just, man, like I just feel like and we've stayed in touch together, right, Bong, just through Facebook, and I've followed your journey. And I just have to say, what an honor and a privilege. I'm so delighted to have you here today.
No, the honors, it's all mine. I mean, I also watch you accelerate. I remember, you trying to figure out if you wanted to go live in Cambodia. You were trying to figure out if you're going to work in Singapore, if you're going to leave this established, cushion, comfy job, and you did that.
Yeah.
Right? You became this international, first lady of Cambodia, just traveling, helping startup companies. So it's been an amazing journey for you. So
oh, I'm so honored, Bong. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I mean, today really, I just wanted to. I think there's so many things that we could touch on. Obviously, with just our diaspora having healed the last 50 years, and then in light of the recent conflict, that's re-triggered a lot of emotions within our Cambodian diaspora as well. So I just want to have a chat with you, and I think our audience today could really get a lot of value and inspiration from you, Bong. So thank you again. So you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. So today really I wanted to just kind of chat with you about Cambodian identity, leadership, and purpose through your extraordinary journey. So yes, well, so as I mentioned in your bio, you started out in life in the Killing Fields of Cambodia. How did those formative struggles shape your worldview and kind of made you who you are today? We could just maybe kick us off with that.
Yeah, I think first generation and second generation Cambodians that came to America, from my own experience and from speaking with others, my age and those, pretty close to my age, we went through an identity crisis, right? Because we didn't fit in that same mold like other Asian Americans. We came here as refugees, so we didn't have access to resources. English was a second language, and we were still experiencing trauma, right? We landed in America, and we still didn't have a real home, right? So many of us ended up bouncing from one city to another city until we found resources and hopefully family. And I remember in the 80s, people did not know where Cambodia was. People did not know, what is a Khmer person? What is a Cambodian? They labeled us, Asians, but they pretty much boxed us in with Vietnamese, Laos, Hmong. So we're kind of categorized with all those other demographics. And I find that many of us really tried to hide our identity, right? We were just going through the motions. We were just trying to
Yeah.
survive, right? And if you came here as a teenager, for example, you spent most of your time supporting your parents, right?
That's right.
Advocating for them, translating for them. Sometimes your parents would pull you out of school to go to meetings, right? Meet with the social workers, the case manager,
Mhm.
the refugee resettlement counselor, right? Or even for an interview, right? So I would say that when it came to the Cambodian identity, especially being an American, it was an evolution, right? It started off very gray, right? There's a lot of gray areas because my mother, so I came in with my mother and my siblings, and my mother didn't really talk about it. I mean, there was a lot of trauma, obviously. Um, and people around us didn't really talk about it, and a lot of the elders were working 3 or 4 jobs, right? So sometimes you
That's
see your
right.
parents late in the evening, right? Or early in the morning. And if you, like I said, if you were a teenager, you're probably watching your siblings, right? You're doing a lot of things. And it wasn't until you probably got a little bit older and more acclimated when you started going to Cambodian New Year, for example. That was probably for many of us, unless we grew up in a Cambodian community, going to a Cambodian New Year was the first time you saw people like us. You saw Cambodia being
Mhm.
celebrated, right? Cambodian culture being celebrated. The first time you probably met, a Buddhist monk, right? A Cambodian monk was probably at a Cambodian New Year. Um, so all these evolutions happen, and I remember I was the kid that grew up in a predominantly Black and Puerto Rican community, right? So I always stuck out.
Right.
But at the same time, people were always unsure about my ethnicity, right? I was a little
Mm.
browner than most Asian,
That's right.
most Asian kids, a little browner, right? I had this Brooklyn accent because I was raised in Brooklyn, right? And I was not willing to back down. Where I think a lot of Asian stereotypes that we were quiet, right? We're quiet. We kind of, shy from certain things. We stay out of trouble. We were the exact opposite, right? Cambodians were
That's
getting
right.
in trouble, right? We were,
That's
we
right,
were,
Mom.
yeah, we were far from being quiet and not speaking out. And sometimes that worked against us, right? Some of us got into a lot of trouble because of that. Some of us got involved in gangs. Some of us got
Mm.
involved in criminal activity. Some of us got kicked out of the house because our parents didn't understand what we were going through, right? And that was another evolution. And I find that somewhere, at least in the first generation, second generation, when we are in our, I would say, late 20s to early 30s, that's when we start really trying to figure out who we are. That's when we start searching, right? Because now you finish high school, right? Either you had close friends that stuck with you or you don't, right? So there's like an emptiness and you're trying to find someone that look like you, that speaks like you, that you can share some common goals with, but also that you can truly learn your background and your history. Now, if you go on to college, maybe you were lucky enough to associate yourself with some type of Cambodian student association,
That's
right?
right.
And you
Mhm.
attended conferences, you took classes, but I'm from the East Coast. There was nothing like that here in New York. Um, so you had to find it by traveling, by reaching out to your elders or by reading and things like that. And that's what I did. I really tried to search out my identity by way of reading and by way of travel. And to be honest, between you and me and obviously everybody else that's walking, that realization, which I thought I had, that realization came to me when we were in Stockton, actually.
Mm,
When
that's right. Yeah. The Rooted in Success conference, right, Mom?
Yep, and I was in my mid-30s. I thought I knew Cambodian identity. I thought I was comfortable with my Cambodian identity. Man, being around all those students, I fell in love with our culture again. It was full of energy, love, support, and there were a lot of things that I didn't know, right? Because I was kind of boxed into my own stereotypes and my own stigmas and understanding of what Khmer culture was. And I saw these young people, and they were amazing. Like the stuff that they were doing, the stuff that they were talking about, the stuff that they were passionate about made me more passionate and more curious about my culture.
Yeah, I remember that conference at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, and you were our keynote speaker.
Yeah.
And that Rooted in Success conference, I'm telling you, Bong, the youth continue to inspire me, absolutely. And I think that was the first time we met you, because you were from Brooklyn. We're like, man, who's this Bong? He's Cambodian American. He's got this Bronx vibe. Like, we were like, oh my God. And I think we immediately were like, oh my God, he's incredible. And I think your keynote speech, I don't know if you remember it. It was so long ago. It was probably like 10 years ago, but it was so moving because you were so authentic. And this was the time before like podcasting even came about. This was before social media really, you know what I mean? And I remember because you shared so openly and so real, like raw, of talking about just growing up in Brooklyn and the challenges that you had. And I think later on we went on to obviously get together with other Cambodian leaders around the country, right, Bong, in Southern California. And I think we did a discussion. We organized a discussion. I think you moderated that, about just like the model minority myth, and that a lot of Cambodian Americans, we did not fit the model minority. Because you said it earlier, we came with trauma, we came from a genocide, we came from suffering, and we came from a people that had so much pain, that we arrived in the US and we were expected to like thrive. And like, how can you thrive if we barely even are surviving, right, Bong? So no, I thank you for that. And just for the audience listening, Bong Emad, I call him Bong. Bong means older brother, as a sign of respect. In Cambodian culture, we always address our elders because you know what? They've lived. And that's why we show them the respect by calling them Bong. But he doesn't look a day over 37, right, y'all? He looks pretty good.
My niece's daughter called me Ta.
Well,
and it like messed me up in my head. I was like, how did I go from Bong to Ta? There's like no Like, what happened to my
You skipped. Well, you skipped. That's just like myself. I didn't have children, and so I went from being just like auntie to now being a yay. That means grandma in Cambodian, because when I married my husband, he's a proud grandfather of a 6-year-old that we love, Bong. So I'm a yay. I'm a certified grandma, and I'm embracing it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so, going back to kind of what you're talking about, just about, I like identity and stuff, and you talked about the lessons learned. I wanted to kind of just maybe touch on leadership within our Cambodian community, and what does leadership mean for you, Bong, in a Cambodian cultural context, in terms of kind of what you have experienced?
Yeah, I think leadership in Khmer communities require you to understand that you're a servant leader, right? That we are serving the community. We're not serving ourselves. We have to serve our community. We have to look at the greater good. And what does that mean? It means that you have to truly understand who you are and where you come from and those people that you're representing. And that's easier said than done. Like I said, I didn't truly know my authentic self until I was in my mid to late 30s, to be honest, right? Because we spend so much of our early adulthood trying to meet the expectations of other people, right? If you come from a traditional Khmer family, and traditional means, that they came from Cambodia and they have the history, the language, the culture, all those things, and they put it on you. They put it on you as a daughter, as a son, right? There's high expectations, right? They sacrifice a lot to get you here. And that's a heavy load, right? And some of us really struggled with that. We didn't know what that meant. What we didn't want was to stick out. That's the last thing we wanted, right? To stick out in regards to having people look at us differently, right? So we try to fit in. And trying to fit in meant that you probably had to hide your identity, right? You didn't want to speak Khmer in front of Americans, right? You don't want to eat the food that you eat at home in front of your friends, right? You didn't want to show you don't want to wear the authentic Khmer clothing around your friends or your family because it looked weak. It made you look different, right? So when I look at leadership now, I have to look at it from the lens of how can my words, how can my voice speak to improve my Khmer community, right? What can I do in regards to my resources, my time, my money to improve the quality of life for people in my community? So it's not about me, it's about my children. It's about my grandchildren. It's about my mother, my yay, my ta, my right? Because they put me in this position, right? They sacrifice a lot so that I could be in this position. And I have to use the time, the money, the resources I have so that they are in a better position. Right. And I think that's
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that says it perfectly, Wong. And I think that's something that going into our next generation, I feel like that is something that our paon kamoy kamoy, the younger generation, the Cambodian Americans who were born here, right? Well, I mean, you were, you arrived here as a young child, whereas like for myself, I came here very young from the refugee camps, and we had to struggle. And I completely understand what you've said about being the other parent, because I too had to parent my parents, because the minute I could speak English, it was like I was translating documents and going to medical appointments. I would miss school because my parents needed me to, just be with them for something. And so I think for our generation, such as yourself, myself, the 1.5, we actually had to grow up really fast. And a lot of that was very heavy. A lot of that had to it impacted like people pleasing, and that's something that I'll very openly share. It's like I'm a recovering people pleaser because I was brought up to always like be the sacrificial lamb. It was always about my parents, my younger siblings. I always had to be a good role model. To your point, Mong, I think leadership, it really in our community, as you said, I think especially for the 1.5, we were all about serving our elders,
Yeah.
and then also serving the next generation. Also, I don't know about you, Bong, but the minute I got my license, I was the driver for my younger siblings.
Yep.
I had that responsibility of making sure I was their transportation, and I was responsible as a 16-year-old whether or not my younger brothers would get to school or their sports activities. So I definitely feel you on that. And so, with sharing your journey, Wong, do you have any advice for young Cambodian Americans who want to lead but maybe feel underrepresented? Anything that you could share with them?
First I would reach out to people that you admire, that you follow, that you want to mimic in a sense, right? In regards to leadership. Young people have a superpower right now that I no longer have, and that's youth, right? People that are in a leadership position, admire younger people that want that leadership position, right? If you are trying to be authentic, if you are doing out of sincerity, I find that people in my position, right? People that look like me, that do the work like me, we admire those things and we want to mentor young people, right? So reach out to those people that you admire by way of Facebook, by way of LinkedIn, by way of Twitter, whatever, X, right? Go to conferences, right? Join associations and just have lunch with that person, right? Have breakfast with that person, have a snack, get some coffee with that person, or just say, hey, could I ask you a few questions? Could I get your opinion on these things?
Mm.
And you would be amazed how many people reach back out, how many people respond, because this is what happened to me, right? And I did this when I was in my early 20s, just traveling to different conferences, volunteering a lot in my community and in other people's community in regards to advocacy. And by doing that, I surrounded myself with people I admired. And once I did that, I wanted to truly understand what they were doing or what they have done to be in the position that they are that time period, right? Um, And you'll be amazed. I think people want to generally support younger people, right? Because they want to be able to influence and guide the next generation that will take over, right? I think that's important. And the
Mhm.
second one
Yeah,
is the second one is find your community. You don't have to do this alone, right? It's a lonely job, right? Trying to advocate for your community, trying to highlight things that are wrong in your community, trying to find resources to support people not only in your household, but maybe people in your school district, uh, people that work in your industry, people that are disenfranchised and marginalized. It's a can be a lonely, frustrating type of work. But you'll find that there are a lot of people doing that work, and they're also looking for community, right? So I think it's important to step outside your comfort zone, and search out for people doing the work that you are doing, or do the work that you want to do.
that's right, Mom. I mean, I think you and I, obviously, we grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. Not that I'm trying to date ourselves, but we didn't have social media back then. We had to go to conferences. And I think like we met because you traveled all the way to Stockton for a Khmer Youth Leadership Conference, right? The
Yeah,
Khmer Students
yeah,
Association. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I remember I forgot the organizer's name. You remember his name?
There were well, we had another one in Sac State. Was it Phil?
No,
Uh,
it wasn't.
um,
He attended the University of Pacific. I think he lives in DC now.
Devin?
Um, Devin.
Devin
Devin.
King. Oh
Yeah,
my God. Yeah.
I rem yeah,
Shout out to
Devin
Devin.
Yeah, Devin reached out to me by email, and I didn't know anything about the association. And he talked about, limited resources and budget. We went back and forth. And when he got done, I said, you know what? You don't have to pay me. I will fly there with my own resources. I will secure my own hotel. You just have to pick me up from the hotel. I mean, from the airport, right? That's it.
That's right.
Pick me up at the airport and drop me off, because I think I flew into San Francisco, right? And then that's almost like what, an hour and a half
That's
drive,
right. Yep. Yep.
right?
All the way to Stockton. Yeah.
Yep. So these were students, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as he said, "Hey, I'm a student. We have this conference. This is the theme." I said, I'll be there. I'll figure it out, right? So that was an example of young people reaching out, not being afraid, not being intimidated, right? I could have said no, but I said yes, and you never know, right?
Absolutely, Bong. I think that's you again sharing like your purpose, and I just want the listeners to really truly like dig deep, like, what is that impact that you want to have? And for you know Bong Imad, Dr. Emad Rahim here, he was like, I'm going to give back to a community that I didn't have when I was growing up, right? Bong? And I think for you and I, now that, we are in our more mature years, we want to give back, right? Because now we're about impact and being purposeful. And so, as we talk about kind of finding purpose through service and education, I wanted you to share with our listeners today, what was, how did Dr. Rahim find his calling? What was that turning point for you?
Well, the calling for me was by accident. Education wasn't something I loved or aspired to be in. I feared education. Education was something I actually hate, because it was something that I could not accelerate in. It was something I struggled in. It was something that seemed to clash with my way of thinking, right? With my living situation, with my condition, all these things. I always highlight that I was a dyslexic student with a learning disability that attended much of my public education by way of special education, right? And by special education, that also meant I had to deal with labels, with stigmas, right, with stereotypes. So when you combine all those things, I hated education. Education was something I feared, so I skipped school, right? I almost got kicked out of school. I was always 2 grades behind, and I barely graduated high school. And I can tell you the only reason, like, reflecting back, the only reason why I graduated high school, it was because of Mr. Willie Dardell, right? A vice principal that saw something in me, that pushed me forward, that refused to give up on me. When everybody else gave up on me, Mr. Dardell refused to do so. And afterwards, after I graduated, after I was ready to celebrate because I hit this milestone, he told me I did not have time to celebrate because people like me did not have time. And within the next week or two, I went from walking the stage of my high school graduation to showing up on a college campus and him completing my application, actually, completing my financial aid because my mother didn't speak English well, making sure I get EOP, making sure I get Pell. And I remember him telling the guidance counselor that he was my father because I didn't have a father in this picture, right? So here's this African American man that saw something in me, that refused to give up on me, and went the extra mile to push me forward. And he's still in my life today. I consider him like a father.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's important for people like me to pay it forward, because if that grown man did not step up and push me forward, I would not be in the situation I am today. Right. So that was my turning point. Right. And when I went into college and started struggling in college because no one taught me what college is supposed to be, right? There's no orientation when I went to school in the late 90s, right? So you went from high school, barely graduating high school, to college. There's no explanation, there's no training, there's no way to acclimate. And I treat college like I treat high school. It was like 13th grade, right? Just trying to get by, messing up, skipping class, doing, getting into trouble, all these things.
Right.
And it took a professor, to also step forward and push me forward and refuse to give up on me. So all these people that kind of pushed me forward, that refused to give up on me, is that turning point, because that pushed me forward, right? That allowed me to look at myself differently. And not only did they push me forward, they provided resources, right? They provided advisement, guidance, mentorship. There's a big difference between saying you help somebody, right?
That's right.
And actually picking up the phone, calling people on their behalf, picking them up to make sure they go to school, right? Supporting them as a father figure. All these things are relevant and very important in order for somebody to not only survive, but thrive.
That's incredible that you had such inspiring people, not inspiring, but just like they were committed. Well, they weren't just like, oh, I'm going to help this kid or whatever, but they were holding you accountable. They were essentially like your parental figures who showed you love through showing up and being there for you. I mean, that is incredible. And I agree with you. And I think that's why it's so important that when you have had opportunities, that you reach back down, right? You reach back and you lift somebody up. And I think that is I see that a lot more now in our community. I think maybe back then we were still struggling as a diaspora, as a refugee community. I think we were all trying to fight to survive. And so many times there was like that crab mentality. Yeah. But I do see the next generation inspire me in a way that I'm like, wow, you guys got this. I think just even recently with the peace rallies, seeing the youth band together in Stockton, whether they had, whatever it was, they showed up. They were a voice. Because 50 years ago, we didn't have a voice. We didn't have a unified diaspora here to speak up. When Cambodia was going through what it was going through, 50 years ago, right? And I just want to share with you, I mean, for me, I said to my husband, I'm like, you know what, if we had someone who could speak up for us 50 years, do you think we would have suffered the same fate? I don't know. So that's why I was like, you know what, it's so important for us now that when we have a voice, we have the English fluency, that we can speak up and use our voice for a purpose. So, I know obviously our diaspora, well, just like yourself, we went through so much trauma from the Khmer Rouge, trauma from just the refugee camp experience, to then getting dropped off here in the in just any city that we were dropped off in, I wanted to just maybe have you share, how did you turn trauma and challenges into fuel for purpose?
Well, so to be honest, like a lot of Khmer people my age, we became workhorses. It's easy for us to be, to put our heads kind of like in the weeds and just do the work, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And when you do the work like that, you kind of lose you lose a part of yourself because you're so focused, you're so heavy on this thing, right? And that's what I did for many years. So it took a while for me to really reflect, right, on the work I did in order to be here. I mean, I have 2 doctorates, right, and I also earned a an honorary doctorate. So technically, I have 3. Um, but that's out of sacrifice, right? So that
mhm,
also meant I was not home a lot. That meant I had to travel a lot. That meant
mhm.
I had to sacrifice a lot, which also meant my wife sacrificed without me
That's
being
right.
here, right?
Yeah.
So you have to look at it from those lens. So I think how I would do it differently now, right, is make sure that I don't do it this alone, that I didn't have to do it alone. Like my success is my family's success,
Mhm.
and making sure that I find time to be with my children, find time to be with my wife, find time to be with my mother, and those type of things. I think that's the important piece. Um, so I think when it comes to success, it goes back to truly knowing yourself, right? This goes all back, this all the road leads back to
Facts.
truly understanding our identity,
That's right.
right? We can never truly be satisfied and be fulfilled if there's always this small empty space of questions like who you are, where you come from, why are you here, those type of things. Um, and we have to be honest because many of us, we came to America with a lot of secrets, right? Um, like you mentioned, our parents, some of our parents, we did not know until later on that they were forced, that they had forced marriages because the Khmer Rouge forced them to get married. And we wondered why our parents were not this loving parent that we thought, parents should be, right? Or there was a lot of abuse. Many of us grew in a very abusive household
That's right. Yeah.
because our parents dealt with so much trauma and they didn't know how to deal with it. And instead they were using those images, um those those experiences that they went through and lashed out on their children and lashed out on their spouse and those type of things, right? And also, a lot of our parents came here and they were tortured, right? They saw their loved ones get killed. They saw very difficult things that never left. And there was no therapy, there was no counseling. So they also lashed out on their children, right? So there's this level of um of identity crisis that was forced by way of abuse. And a lot of us tried to fight our Cambodian identity because it was
Yeah.
tied so much in abuse, so much in trauma, right? It did not look natural. It did not feel natural by what we thought every American is experiencing, right? So when your friend said I was, your friends going to Thanksgiving dinner, going to Christmas parties, you didn't have that unique experience if you were this Cambodian refugee. Right? So we have to deal with that. We have to figure that out in order to truly be satisfied with our own success, right? Because we are never truly satisfied with our own success. We will always struggle with identity crisis, right? Um, we will always struggle with imposter syndrome, right? We will always struggle in our marriages, in being a parent, if we don't deal with that inner trauma that we've experienced since our childhood, right? And that's not going to allow us to evolve and transform to the person we're supposed to be, right? To the person we are today, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think the healing, recently my husband Moni and we were asked to be a part of the Khmer Healing Summit, and it was attended by 100, I think, Cambodians from around the world. We had the US, we had Australia, we had someone from the UK. But I think the healing part is so important, Bong, because like you said, we were just thrown here to just survive. And I don't think any of us took the time. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have mental health services that were culturally relevant, understanding our Khmer experience. And so many of us just kind of had to figure it out. But, my husband and I, we talk about that all the time. He's in his early 50s and he raised his 2 sons here. And a lot of times, a lot of the conflict comes from just that not understanding where your grandparents or your parents came from. And so when you're born here in the US, you're brought up here, you expect kind of like this kind of a quote unquote American type of family. And then your family's like from Cambodia and they have all these, like you said, like all these issues with like domestic violence and substance abuse. And you're like, why is my family so different from my friends, right? From my American friends. And then they start to feel this like lack of self-worth. And obviously, so, I think right now, I think after like 50 years of healing, I feel like our community still has a lot to heal, but I think a lot of it starts with dialogue and a lot of it starts with our older generation, Long, like sharing their stories, understanding their pain. And I too didn't understand like why our community, like just the verbal abuse and just the the words that are used and things like that, and why there's so much sometimes infighting. It's heartbreaking. But then when you go back to understand that was what the Khmer Rouge intended to do, was you could oppress people by dividing and conquering them. And so I think back now, just recently with the whole border conflict and seeing the unity again, for me, I'm like, does it really take something traumatic again to happen for Cambodians to kind of be like, okay, we really need to like get our stuff together and like really heal from this, Bong? So I mean, in just kind of any insights or like key takeaways, any like, can you share your emotions or reflections recently with what's been going on, if you'd be okay to share?
No, so first off, I think we have to make things that feel unnatural be natural, like therapy, right? Therapy is something that's not natural in Cambodian culture, right? Even today, when I told my mother that I see a therapist, she's like, "Why are you wasting your money? Why would you tell our history to somebody? Why would you tell our business to somebody?"
That's
Right?
right. Yeah.
She doesn't understand that. And as I was explaining this stuff to her, and she's like, "Yeah, we could have gone to the Buddhist temple to do something like that, right?" That's in her mind, right? We could have just you could have just spoke to your elders, and then the idea of medication, right? Self-medication. That medication is bad sometimes, right? That there are other options in Cambodia that you could be taking to get better. So just making sure that people understand, both holistic care, but also medical care, right? That both things are natural and both things are okay if you do it in the right way, right? If you approach it in the right way. Um, that it's okay to express your trauma by way of reaching out to people in your community, right? Like I said, I did not share my personal journey, my story, my history. Even my wife didn't know a lot about the stuff that I've been through. That I was, that I'd been shot, that I'd been stabbed, that I was born in a concentration camp. She didn't know that until maybe 8, 9 years into our marriage. Right? So I
Wow.
had to deal with that stuff alone. And then when anxiety kicked in, right? When anxiety kicked in like really bad, I was in denial because I told myself I'm built for stress. I'm built for anxiety. Like of course I can handle anxiety. If I can't handle anxiety, I'm weak, right? And then when it got really bad, when I couldn't function, when I couldn't even get out of the house, when I couldn't sleep, that's when I really searched for help. That's when I really searched for answers. And I hope that people that are listening to this and they are experiencing something similar and they're struggling, it's never too late to ask for help. and it's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, right?
Absolutely.
And you could be that one person in your family that helps to create this like tipping point where then other
Mhm.
people are brave enough to seek help and support because you're doing it and you made it natural.
Absolutely. Well, be the one to break that generational trauma and change the whole trajectory of your generations to come. And oh my gosh, I feel like we could just be inspired by you, but I know you have to get going. So I just wanted to, really say thank you. And wow, what a great honor, Bong. And I feel like this is not the last time I'm going to bug you for an interview, but I just want to say thank you. And with that, do you have any kind of final words for our audience? Anything that Dr. Emad Rahim wants to leave with the world today?
No, I just want to say I'm very proud of our youth. Like you mentioned, if you follow a lot of the social media campaigns, it was the students, right? It was the college students, it was the high school students that's really pushing these rallies, organizing what was happening in DC, what was happening in Seattle, what was happening in New York City. It was the students, it was the younger population that was pushing, right? That was pushing the strings, that was organizing, that was uh, pushing the political leaders, right, to respond. And it was a lot of young people that I have never heard from before, like in regards to people hashtagging me in quotes and commas. That's trying to get my response, to speak out on this situation. So I'm just proud that it didn't feel forced. I mean, obviously it was forced, but it was very organic, right? There was this huge organic campaign out of love and support for Cambodia and Cambodian people. So I'm proud.
Absolutely.
I'm proud of our people.
Yeah, well, I echo those sentiments. I am so proud of this next generation, and I think for you and I, as kind of like the generation that just kind of had to figure stuff out, when we got dropped off here in the U.S., I am really proud. And again, like you said earlier, anytime I get a message from a younger Khmer, whether they're Khmer in Cambodia or Khmer anywhere, I always feel the need to I gotta respond because you know I want to be that person to kind of give them that opportunity or maybe make a connection or just help them in some way because someone helped you and I along the way. So Dr. Emad Rahim, it's been a pleasure. Bong Akon Charan, thank you so much, Bong Akon. And I'm gonna go ahead and just say, everyone follow Dr. Emad Rahim on his socials. I'm going to make sure I tag all of his stuff. So please, please follow this amazing Cambodian American leader, activist, author. Oh my gosh, you got more degrees than a thermometer, Bong. I'm so proud. I just want to say it has been truly an honor and a privilege to know you, to be your friend, your younger sister, and just to really, try and emulate everything you've done for our community. Starting from education. Education is power. Education gives you a voice. Education gives you a platform. And education doesn't mean you got to go and get PhDs like Dr. Emad Rahim, but education means getting to know yourself, your history, and owning things like your identity and all that. And so, Bong, thank you so much, and we really want to wish you all the best, and really just look forward to our next conversation. And I hope to see you soon.
You're welcome, and the pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bong. Take care. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't forget, tune in and follow Dr. Emad Rahim on all his socials. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.